be no more. Welcome to the Last Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Chandler, here with my co-host, as always, Christian Miller.
Bonus episode. Here we go.
Bonus, whether it's coming out now or coming out later, nobody knows. I don't know right now.
This is our second episode we're recording in like
In the
3
matter of,
days.
no, this is our third episode that we're recording in a week.
That too.
Yeah, so we're not sure if this is coming out right after we record or if we're backlogging this for later. So it'll come out whenever you hear it. So thank you for even listening and clicking on it to begin with. But at the time of recording, I should also mention what we're doing first. This is Eternal Star Wars. This is, I think, only the second installment of our Star Wars is blank Star Wars series. But at the time of this recording, this is still a fairly new movie. It was just released on Disney Plus a couple of weeks ago. So Christian and I were able to give it another kind of look. And now we're going to discuss whether this is Star Wars or not. And we're going to give...
And what does that mean? That's confusing.
What does that mean?
Because it's a Marvel movie. Well,
exactly.
what we mean when we say is blank Star Wars is... it depends on when it's made, but so it could either be, did this have an effect on Star Wars being made? Did it influence George Lucas, or did it draw inspiration from Star Wars in any way, or does it do any of the things culturally or as a film that Star Wars did? And we can go into specifics about the very minute details about like the similarities between, or the way Star Wars is made versus how other movies are made. But there is a preface that like any director that is making movies nowadays likely watched Star Wars as a kid.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, that's cool. But like we mean their intentions are sort of drawing from those exact style points that Star Wars did. So this is a way for us to review a film while still staying on topic with this podcast, basically.
Yeah. We have 5 criteria that are very nitpicky things about movies. You know, some may think that it's very nitpicky, but it's 5 things that we think every Star Wars movie has at least 3 or 4 of these. Even if you look at like the actual Star Wars movies, they don't always have all 5 of these things. But our kind of thing here is if a movie gets at least 3 of these 5, it is considered Star Wars. If you remember American Graffiti, which we covered, we wanted to be Star Wars so badly that we made up a 6th criteria so that it would classify as Star Wars. Which is literally just the fact that it was directed by George Lucas. That was it. That was the criteria. So it kind of registered as Star Wars. So
it's an honorary Star Wars because it was
yeah,
George Lucas's ticket to Hollywood, baby.
And there's way too many American Graffiti references in the rest of his stuff. So including, Star Wars. So we got one in Book of Boba Fett this week. If you listen to the episode 3 video. So let's go ahead, and at the beginning of the episode, top of the episode, we want to predict on or not really predict, but Christian, do you think this is Star Wars? Before we go into the specifics, do you think that Eternals is Star Wars? Why and why not?
I don't think it is. Because so many of the things it's trying to do is like trying to strip away at the things that are in line with Star Wars, and it almost feels like it's embarrassed about its influences in a way that's like, if you compare it to what Star Wars is unabashedly just weird and ridiculous, and you don't have every 5 minutes a character looking at things on that comes across the screen, and you don't have a character being like, that's weird. Why is it called Jizz Whalen, which is what they call jazz?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have that. There's nothing like Star Wars is sincere, and this movie is mostly insincere. If I
Yeah,
were to put it just very simply.
yeah. Um, I am having trouble deciding whether I think it's Star Wars or not. Because on one hand, I do not think it is, just because, as we were talking about before, the cultural impact of this movie is not nearly to anything that any Star Wars movie has had, nor have people talked about this movie nearly as much as they talk about Star Wars. Um, I mean, maybe some people do. I'm not as big into the Marvel fandom stuff as I used to be, so maybe people are talking about this a lot. Um, but I don't think that the impact that this movie had um, is anything close to Star Wars. But like we did say, there are other criteria. So this may be Star Wars, and it may be underground Star Wars, as we'll say, because I think that we should have Star Wars and underground Star Wars. So like maybe it
I
didn't have the impact, but it meets the criteria.
I don't I don't think the term underground really fits Star Wars because at the end of the day, even its failures are bankrolled by Disney.
Yeah, that's true.
But you are making a good point that like not everything in Star Wars fits these criteria. Not everything in Star Wars is has cultural impact.
Yeah.
Excuse me. For example, Star Wars Resistance, the animated show. I was thinking about this
Yes.
the other day.
Heard great things about it. Still haven't watched it. I need to though.
It zeroes in on a little bit of rebellion stuff, a lot of kid humor, and just things going fast. They
Nice.
talk about
I like
American
that.
graffiti. It's got a lot of American like racing sort of imagery in it. Um, but that doesn't represent all of Star Wars, and I think it's good for what it is, but it's not all of what Star Wars is good at. So if or like we could talk about something that's we don't like maybe that still could fit in and
Yeah.
still pass the test.
Yeah. And in that case, it would be not underground, whatever we can find a better word for. That's not fully Star Wars, but it's still in the same realm. Um, so I guess that we can go into.
Hold on, it's been a year since we've done this.
It has been a year. Did you
It
just look
almost
that up
exactly
for the American
no.
Graffiti episode?
It's been basically a year. Uh,
Interesting.
so we're working out the kinks for this annual episode.
Yeah, I would like to start making it not an annual episode. So maybe we can get, if you guys like these, please let us know, and we'll try to do these episodes more often throughout the year. But when you're a show that focuses more on TV shows and stuff, it's kind of difficult to like squeeze in stuff like this. Um, so anyway, let's jump into the first of our 5 criteria. And we're just going to start with dialogue. That's all that's written here. I think Star Wars has a very distinct dialogue in it, especially in older,
Two,
not, huh?
the original trilogy.
Yeah, especially, well, even in the prequels. And I think it's like, it's that Shakespearean, not, it was in the beginning, but then it's like, people don't have like normal conversations like we do in real life. Like that's just started in like Mando and Boba Fett. We're just now seeing Star Wars characters having normal human conversations. Um, and so I think that that is definitely a trait of Star Wars in the way that they talk very practically and very like just like kind of straightforward and um you know what I'm saying? Like so, I mean there are characters that are not like that, but it
Uh, the dialogue I wouldn't say is Shakespearean, but it in a similar way of like compared to modern movies is not. It's not like a normal way of speaking.
mhm.
It never really was trying to emulate reality, which is I think part of why A New Hope was so successful is that like at the time there were all these political thrillers and crime thrillers that were the most successful genres, and people were getting tired of this new relatively new thing of like this is real society reflected in movies. What if we just sort of escaped into fantasy? And so
Yeah.
part of the way the characters spoke was a factor in how Star Wars was able to get people to escape.
Hmm.
the dreary 1970s. Um, if we're going into Eternals, they that movie essentially uses the same sort of dialogue style as Marvel movies.
Yeah,
Um, that's been
which
established
is
since Iron Man.
we're gonna be serious for most things, and then we're gonna be really sarcastic or joking in other parts. Um, it doesn't really stay on one of it doesn't stay on one side of the line really. Um, the best example being, um,
And especially the idea that like everyone makes jokes.
yeah, exactly.
Like
Um,
there's not just like a funny character.
no, in Star
There's
Wars
like
we had like
everyone.
Lando, I
If
think.
if the writer making the movie is like, this movie needs humor, this scene has these characters, I'm going to make a humorous moment through these people because that's what should happen, not because this character is funny.
Yeah, I think a lot less nowadays. We're seeing like just like a funny character who is the comedic relief. We're seeing a bunch of characters who are all funny together. Not that that's good or bad, but a good example in this movie
It's
being,
bad.
I'm yeah, it's hopefully we can go back to having some like seriously funny characters. Um, I mean, we kind of all thought that Tony Stark was going to be that, and then everybody started making jokes. So, um, but I think in this movie, the first example I can think of is when the first deviant shows back up in the beginning, when Cersei and Sprite are with um, Cersei's boyfriend, and then he's just like, "What is that?" Like he's like being unintentionally funny and speaking normal, like having normal reactions. Um, Whereas they're like being like, well, they're talking in that otherworldly way to each other. Um, you know, Playing on each side of the line. So, um, for dialogue, I think I'm gonna have to say no, that this does not fit the normal Star Wars dialogue trope that we have created in our minds.
Yeah, it's um it's not the, and we'll get into this later, like the relation between the movie's quality and what we expected it to be.
Hmm.
Um, like we didn't like expect everything about this to be Star Wars. We didn't even really expect it to be Star Wars. If I thought if it was good, it was gonna at least share some of like um some core aspects
Yeah.
with it. Um, where was I going with that? Oh, because yeah, we this whole the reason we're doing this episode, we had not seen it yet, and we're like, we're gonna put Eternals on the list, and here we are. And
Yeah.
I made the graphic for it like 2 3 months ago,
Which is
and
way
because,
outdated now.
oh no, it's not. It's still number 30.
Oh, it is because we haven't done another Last Star Wars podcast episode.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think we've said our piece. It's Marvel dialogue. It's not. First of all, I don't like it. Second of all, it doesn't really share
Yeah.
anything with Star Wars because of this aggressive tendency to try to make everything so modern, and to and it impacts how we relate to the characters and how the character's story comes across, because every character is like, you know there's a line where Athena says, "I already did the speech," saying that to Fastos. We've got two different mentions of DC characters. Um, like everything's self-aware,
Yeah.
that it doesn't. It's on the surface, it's different dialogue, but I think it comes from a different artistic approach from Star Wars, which is, I'm just doing this weird thing, and you're gonna deal with it.
Yeah. And an example of us not always having we don't always need every character to be funny in Star Wars. The main character of the OT, Luke, is not funny. Like never have in my like history with Star Wars have ever been like, I really like Luke. He's a funny guy.
Well,
No,
and
granted,
that's
there
I
are
think that's
funny moments.
that's also that sheds some light on like what Marvel views as funny, is because like comedy in Marvel is people having like comedy writer brain. Like everyone has a comedy writer inside their head
Yeah.
thinking of quips, whereas Luke is just an idiot and he's so wholesome and you laugh at that.
Yeah.
But he's not saying witty things.
Some of the best comedy in movies is comedy that's not actually funny, but you're laughing at the character trying to be funny.
Or or just doing anything. It doesn't have to be them trying to be funny. It's just like
Yeah.
you see him reacting to Han, him interacting with Han, and that is funny because of how different they are. Like it's not about inserting a dialogue. It's like what the dialogue says about their characters and how they are different.
Yeah. So that's going to be a no on the dialogue. So we're going to move on to the second one of our criteria here, which is going to be the, um, I guess, the observance of multiple plot lines. A lot of times in Star Wars, especially in, it happens so much in the sequel or the prequel trilogy, and even in the sequels, of having multiple plot lines that are all happening simultaneously, and we're skipping around between multiple plot lines, but then they all come together, or not. But most of the time, they come together at the end to form a cohesive sort of timeline of events. Um, we see it a lot when okay, the example that comes to mind, the Last Jedi. You have Finn and Rose going off over here. You got Rey going off over here with Kylo, and then you also have the Resistance, and we jump in between the plot lines, and we see that kind of going in their different ways before we come back together.
Are any of the other categories do any of the other ones have to do with plot?
No, this is the one.
Okay, so can we add in the hero's journey as part of this?
Yes,
I can't believe we didn't talk about the hero's journey with the American Graffiti.
I think we did. We added it
We
in.
we were behind on prepping, so I think part of our categories were influenced by the fact that we knew we were talking about American Graffiti.
Yeah,
But like generally, if we're talking about how a story is told and comparing Star Wars to other things, it's the hero's journey.
yeah, I agree.
But also like a stylistic thing is uh, at least during the third act you're intercutting between a bunch of different uh, locations and characters because they're all pretty much war movies.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so does Eternals have multiple plot lines? Yes, but it's different parts in the chronology. And is it a hero's journey? Definitely not.
No, it's
What would you say?
the hero's journey is weird because on one hand it's on one hand it kind of is because it's them trying to save the world, but also like it's not a coming from nothing to something, coming from nothing to being a hero kind of journey, because I mean all these people are already, they've already done all these great things, and now it's just like one more thing they have to do, you know um you can say the main character is Cersei in it. Like she's already powerful. I mean, she gets like she figures out she can do other stuff at the end of the movie, but it's mostly like doing what she's always done, just to a higher degree. Um, it's not a huge, um, I guess, origin. Not really. Origin's a bad word because a hero's journey does not have to be an origin story. Um,
But in the
but
context of the MCU, this is an introduction to some heroes, and it's not really an origin.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not. I feel like there's stretches of this movie that have like 20 minutes without Cersei, which is weird.
yeah, especially because she's definitely supposed to be the main character.
Yeah, and you could also think about like Ajak. Ajak is the closest thing to a mentor, but she only gets really like one scene with Cersei. Ajak has more scenes with Icarus than she does with Cersei.
Hmm.
Um, so you don't get a full, like, really in-depth sort of exploration of the mentor and hero uh, relationship there. Um, yeah, like you said, there's no humble beginnings. It's not really crossing. from the ordinary to the extraordinary, because it's I mean it's sort of in the reverse, because they are extraordinary from their beginning, and they have to their arc is appreciating the ordinary of just normal people. And that's how you would, if you're talking about those themes, that's what they are. But it's not like, I still don't think it's like a reverse hero's journey that makes it a subversion or anything like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I
It's
think that
it's a thing that's happening a lot with the MCU, because we've gotten Captain Marvel, we've gotten Shang-Chi, Black Panther technically, but
I would say that
because
Shang-Chi's a hero's journey. Other than, I mean, like,
hold
yeah,
on,
he can.
I've not finished
Okay,
what I'm saying.
okay,
Like, because they're trying to speed up the universe, and they don't feel like they have time to slowly introduce characters in a trilogy. Um, they because they already have an audience, and it's like, well, we had to build all this up through 3 Iron Man movies, 3 Captain America movies. Um, they have characters that have either already been introduced or are introduced, and their stories about how they're already superheroes, basically, or but they like forgotten some of the past, or they're ignoring some of their past. Um, I think they're all done in different levels of effectiveness. Black Panther, I think, is the best. Shang-Chi,
yeah,
I still have some problems with that movie, but like still pretty good. And then Captain Marvel, the way that the amnesia, I just think it didn't really work. It's really hard to make a story about a character who literally doesn't know who they are.
yeah. But I
So
mean,
this is a
this
similar
whole
thing.
Eternals thing is technically that too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, I think the lie of Arishem
I find it very
is not
compelling, actually.
it's not executed well, but I think it's, it's interesting to explore. But uh, we start off with Cersei having already seen some of her progression as this godlike person, and now it's like she's trying to live a normal life.
Hmm.
And then it all comes back, but
Yeah,
it's not really the ordinary. What I'm saying is that, like, that's because everything with Marvel feels like it needs to be established. It's hard to, not that it needs to fit the mold of the hero's journey, but it helps if you're like, if you feel grounded, and then you branch out into
hmm,
the weird stuff.
yeah, I agree. So for plot, we're also going to say no. So that's two negatives for Is Eternal Star Wars. So we're going to move on to something that Christian likes to talk about with Star Wars, and that is a big word that I didn't really know until he brought it up, but the word pastiche, or I have multiple genres written beside it so I can remember what it means.
Yeah, yeah. So if this is the first time listening to us talk about pastiche, or to this very short series so far, Star Wars is pastiche because it blends together, um, World War II movies, blends together Eastern philosophy, uh, and
Kurosawa being another big one.
yeah, samurai movies, um, and then pulp sci-fi. So that's essentially Star Wars. It's so ubiquitous. Everything. If you see something, and like, you know if it looks like it's from Star Wars or not, and that's
Yeah,
because it compiled all these things, and it's so iconic that um, it's always a revelation when you find out that it traces back to different things. Okay, with Eternals, um, it's it's drawing from myths, which Star Wars also drew from myths.
hmm,
Less from specific myths and more from like Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero's Journey, which sort of pointed out the commonalities between myths, whereas Eternals is sort of breaking that and going into, okay, here's the Eternals basically forming the story of Gilgamesh and Athena and the Odyssey with Circe. Some of the other characters I had looked up before this recording apparently are connected with Greek mythology.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
Kingo is connected to Babylonian mythology, like all their names basically.
yeah.
And their powers, their backgrounds, their and the setting of some of the scenes are it's connected into the actual cultures of the world
Hmm.
and the myths that it's it's a way for the MCU to expand their universe because anything ordinary about our world, MCU has to go and be like, there's superheroes involved in that.
Yeah. So it's also,
Um,
I think it's also very sci-fi and spacey, and
and
the
yeah,
stuff with Arishem and the stuff on their ship is very. It feels very like the ship feels very Star Trekky in a way. Like
I don't know.
I also have
No,
not seen
because
Star Trek but like twice, so it's what I think of when I think of Star Trek.
Star Trek is like more Earth based, um, and projecting a futuristic like Earth society.
I was meaning
This
more
feels
of the stuff of like more of like the Fastos, like being able to just like create anything with like just by like moving his hands around, being able to create stuff, and um all the different technologies on the ship, stuff like that.
yeah, it definitely is more it's not Star Wars because it's
No.
not like Star Wars like one of their design sort of points was making things look sort of like real world technology,
Mm-hmm.
but also making it look old.
Cause it's supposed to be a long time ago.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of, this movie kind of has a crawl
It does. I was
where,
thinking about that when I was watching it.
and that's a direct homage for sure. Um, Not as bombastic because it's not with fanfare. It's
Mm.
not text floating in space, but it is expository information that is, on second watch, very weird to read because
It's all
it,
false.
yeah, it's not. This
None
is
of it is
what
true.
this is like an omniscient narrator telling us this, but it's not the right information. It's
I
not like
I guess
said by a character.
it's like what the Eternals know, or what it's what Cersei knows at the beginning. Let's just be honest. It's what Cersei knows at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I just think
Or sorry, not the episode, the movie. It's what Cersei knows at the beginning of the movie. Like, but it's all
it's just
false.
it's strange because like with Star Wars, anytime a crawl is used, it's always like this is very this is undisputable fact.
Yeah.
This is the conflict, this is the setting, these are the resources. Um, there's no getting around this. We're not trying to trick you.
Yeah.
This is literally, and if you would have missed anything, because every time that this is happening in Star Wars, most of the time it's in the middle of an action. It's in media res, so it's like I'll catch you up to speed, and then we're off. Whereas this is like it's it's lies, and celestial propaganda.
Yeah.
It is names that you don't memorize until it's said 5 times in the movie, and it's no really events other than like sci-fi concepts as who was created and who are they fighting and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's definitely Star Wars in that it's homage, but it's not doing it in any of the effective ways that Star Wars
No,
did it.
I would agree. Do you think there are any other genres that this movie is bringing in?
Superhero comic book, I
Yeah,
guess. Which
but does sci-fi kind of bleed into that, or would you
yeah.
consider that separate? Because I would
Um,
almost consider them the same thing.
Well, I mean, it's not drawing from sci-fi movies, like 2001 or
Oh yeah, no, you're right.
like Planet of the Apes. I don't know. Thinking of monkey movies. Um, uh, like it's not like a movie that's like, you know, what if technology did this to us humans? It's more of like, you know, action story, people
Hmm.
with powers, extraordinary abilities. So it's more drawn from comic books and the now universal genre of the MCU. Uh, and it's not. It's disappointing because this movie was hyped up as something that's different. Uh, than yeah. Okay, this is the beginning. We're going straight to the beginning now of our process with this movie. I didn't want to start at this, but now is the time to talk about it. This movie was billed as like the potential Oscar-y movie made by a director who is not a blockbuster director, Chloe Zhao, who at the time the movie came out had already won Best Picture for Nomadland, but had already been like this like up and coming,
Yeah.
like prestigious indie director, and who had such a distinct style that you had to assume that she was not going to blend in with the MCU format, but she basically did. There's a lot of deviations. There's a lot of different things about it. Um, I think the sheer ambition of this movie proves that it's not just another Ant-Man. No offense to Ant-Man, it's fine. Pop it in, watch it with your kids. Um, I just realized the phrase "pop it in" is obsolete if you're talking about movies. You don't pop movies in anymore.
I mean, we haven't since VHS, really.
Since oh my gosh, since DVDs.
Yeah, but I mean, with the VHS, you actually get to like you pop the actual movie in instead of just like,
Okay, it's not strict onomatopoeia. It's not
okay,
making a pop sound, but that's the
okay,
word. It's a
okay.
physical movement.
I understand what you mean.
I'm included in this. I bought the Indiana Jones collection, Blu-ray before we had to do our podcast about that.
Yeah.
I bought that from Walmart while getting groceries, and
I mean, I still have DVDs, so I feel you.
and I got it, but I only watched the digital version because I wasn't gonna like use my roommate's Xbox without.
Yeah, you got it home and then you're like, oh, I don't actually have a DVD player.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I don't
I
either.
like I like the isolated thing you just said. I still have DVDs.
I mean, I do, but not with me because I don't have a DVD player. But I mean, I definitely still own them. Um, so in
What was
terms of
what
we're
was I saying? Oh, anyway, um,
we love tangents here.
this okay. Basically, it's not pastiche because it's basically just Marvel, despite the big concepts that it's trying to do. Which, if it wasn't doing those things, we would have no interest in talking about it on our Star Wars podcast anyway. By the end of the day, it aligns so much with MCU. Um, but it does incorporate sort of the things that Chloe Zhao learned as an indie filmmaker. She's great with actors, so every performance in here is pretty good, despite um, just not liking how the characters are written.
Yeah,
Just the performers are all great. The cast is great, and the a lot of the cinematography, not all of it. Um, you could tell it was Chloe Zhao before behind the camera.
hmm
Um, but it's yeah. I'm trying to tread the line between saying why it's not Star Wars and like why I don't like it because they're two different
yeah,
questions. But I'm explaining why I don't like it, and also it's not Star Wars.
yeah. I would say in terms of pastiche, we also get a no for this movie because mainly this is just another superhero MCU story that pretty much for the most part follows the same kind of like things as we see in most Marvel movies. So,
And it
uh,
ends with a trailer.
yeah,
Like the ending of the actual movie is, well, this thing didn't fully work out. Tune in next time. And then
for Thanos' brother.
and then the end credits scene. That's infuriating. I honestly think that's the worst. Like
You about the Blade
that
reference or the Thanos' brother reference?
the Thanos' brother one. That's when I had already regretted my decision to see this movie in theaters. But at that point, I'm just like, what are they doing?
And casting Harry Styles.
They think they're invincible, and I'm just like foreseeing that like even if they are casting stars and doing all this wild stuff and you know producing all this synergy between TV and movies, I just think that within the next decade, people are just going to be so over it. Um, it honestly like literally okay. If someone had spoiled for me the ending or the end credit scene,
I had it
like
spoiled before and I didn't care.
yeah, if like one of the comedians I follow was like, I don't know, Eternals ends with the end credit scene where a drunk little troll voiced by Patton Oswalt stumbles into the spaceship, and then Harry Styles erupts out of a pure rainbow, and he comes in and he's like, I'm Thanos' brother, but I'm also the god of love. Um, yeah, I'm gonna join you in your next adventure. I would be like, that's a hilarious fake ending to this movie. It's
Yeah,
a good joke,
yeah.
but it's just where we're at right now.
But I also got it spoiled for me and was just like, cool, I don't care.
I didn't believe it. I was like, why would Harry Styles do this?
Yeah, because I think I told you about it beforehand. I was like, you're not going to believe this. Harry Styles is in this movie. And you were like, no. Like, no, no, it's not. But yeah, when you were saying trailer for the next movie, are you basically talking about the Blade part?
No, I was talking about the ending of the actual movie,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
of them being whisked away.
Yeah. Anyway, let's say no to the pastiche and let's move on to the next one, which may actually be have a better outcome.
I don't want to keep talking. All I'll say, I don't want to. This isn't a fix the movie episode. I don't want to try to one up the writers. All
Do
I'll
it.
say
One up the
is
writers.
that I wouldn't try to do the Marvel thing with this movie. And drawing on those myths, I think I would just make the story feel more mythical.
Hmm.
There's some really cool images in there that feel like that, like turning the deviant into a tree and turning Tiamat into a statue. That's very strong. Like anything of the transformation stuff, like those are strong images that resonate universally as a story device. I just wish the journey of the characters reflected a transformation that would have really just done that better. And oh, what else was I gonna say? Spencer, help me out. Filibuster.
Um,
Don't say that.
what was that?
Uh,
You have no idea what I was gonna do.
oh, because okay, they turned Tiamat into a essentially a Greek statue, a marble statue.
Hmm.
I just like that idea of like turning, letting go of the past or whatever, turning it into a statue and then becoming just people.
Hmm.
I think that could have been better executed. It also could have been maybe done better as a show, but I also don't think everything needs to be a show.
Yeah. All right. Well, this movie officially does not qualify as Star Wars because we've lost three of the categories. Do we even bother going over the last two?
Um,
I think we can say yes to one of them, just like in one sentence, because one of them is romance. I mean, yeah. a lot of things that drive Cersei in this movie is her love for like her like not love for Icarus, but also the fact that she did love Icarus and the fact that he still loves her, and it's a lot. So I feel like we can say yes to the romance
On a technicality.
on a technical. Yeah, I agree. It's not a good romance story, but it is one.
Yeah, it's not. It's strange. It's just not. I don't want to try to conform everything to my like very fairy tale influence view of romance. And like which includes Star Wars. Star Wars is a fairy tale in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Oop, tally it up. It only took 30 minutes for me to say in a lot of ways.
It actually took you uh almost exactly 40 minutes.
Oh yeah, it is 40 minutes. That's even better. Um, it's just I don't know. That's just not. I don't like it. It was pegged to be this like up they were married and everything, and like
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, it's a like it feels like a more of a casual dating relationship that they get over. Where it's like this is like a 5,000 year thing. I just didn't fully buy that. Like, what do they do?
yeah,
I don't know.
I
And
agree.
okay, I will give Marvel props for trying to do a sex scene, but it's not. It's still Marvel. They're still pretty bland about it,
Yeah,
and it doesn't. Again, it's not. It's not showing enough about what the characters think or do. So,
yeah,
but ooh, it's mature. It's Marvel's aging up. I think that's part of it. They're like our audience is aging up, so we've got to make our movies more mature.
yeah.
Our audience now cares about the Oscars.
Well, also like some of the language that was used in Shang-Chi, I was like, we can say that in Marvel movies now. Like, as another yet another example of the fact that they're aging up. Like they were like, I was like, dang, that's crazy. We can say that now in a Marvel movie and not get in trouble for it. I'm gonna
You might need
filibuster.
to
You
talk.
ready? I'm
No,
gonna.
I don't need to talk.
Okay, I was kidding. Yeah, there is one more if you want to go over it, or we can call the episode and give our official review.
What's a category?
Justice.
Oh yeah, sure.
So, is this movie about justice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say yeah. I would say yeah. I think that's this is another one of those. This
It's a
and
compassionate view of humanity. So
yeah, yeah, and they're trying to stop the Aramesh from destroying all of humanity. So I would say yes that this is about justice. So you know what that means, Christian? This movie does not qualify as Star Wars unless we give it a special point because they're from space, which I would not. So
yeah.
okay, the official we were correct. The official I guess the official response is that Eternals is not Star Wars. But did you still enjoy yourself watching this movie? I think we all know that you we can all kind of gather from your perspective that you don't like this movie.
No, it's frustrating because it's achieving or it's setting out to achieve more than the average Marvel movie. And it's you can tell a lot of good stuff is in there, but the fact that it's sorry, I'm fiddling with the bottle cap.
It's all good. I do
Um,
it most of the time.
it's trying to do something and failing, and that feels more disappointing than trying a little bit and doing kind of well at that.
Yeah.
So, and
I
also I could have watched The Last Duel or House of Gucci instead of this, but because of the podcast,
I need
even
to
though
watch.
this wasn't, even though this episode was delayed, I chose to watch it in theaters, and I passed up watching Adam Driver, uh, in a
Yeah.
theater, which
I want to watch The
this
Last
whole
Duel
year
so
haven't
bad.
done.
I
Yeah,
want to
it's
watch
on
The Last
HBO
Duel.
Max though.
Yeah. Well, I because I don't always go into it like, oh, what is this setting up? Sometimes I just go into, especially with Marvel movies, I kind of just go into them just to like watch and have a good time. And so I think I did have a good time watching this movie. And the way that I prepared for this episode is I just kind of skimmed through the best parts of the movie and just kind of like watched the best scenes again and was like, oh, this movie's pretty good. But then I was like, what parts did I skip and why did I skip them? And I was like, oh, because they're not that interesting. So I think on first viewing, I had a really good time watching the movie. I think the more I return to it, the less I will have a fun time. So yeah, that's my official review.
I think there shouldn't have been action.
Should not.
That's my hot take. I think it just should have
That
been a
is a
drama.
pretty hot take. Interesting. That is a very
You can
hot
still
take.
have like a apocalypse thing, but it should have all been like just like weird like like visuals of
Mm-hmm.
like the idea of seeing destruction, but there should never have been an action scene. I think if they would have set that rule from the start, it could have been better.
Interesting. Well, I have nothing
I
more to.
don't feel like elaborating because I like okay before this movie, before watching the movie today, I was like, this can only be an hour long discussion.
Yeah.
And then I was watching the movie and I was like, I have enough ideas to probably fill a 2 hour discussion. And then we've been recording for not even an hour, but I feel like I've been talking for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't
So
have anything else to say, so I'm willing to wrap up this episode here if you are.
please.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Last Star Wars podcast. If you want to reach us on any of our social medias, you can reach us on Instagram and Twitter at Last Star Wars Pod, or you can reach us on Facebook and YouTube at the Last Star Wars Podcast. If you want to email us, let us know what movie, TV show, piece of media you want to see on Is Blank Star Wars next. And just let us know any future episodes you want to see, anything like that. You can email us at laststarwarspod@gmail.com. And last but not least, I highly recommend you go to the first link in the description, which is starwarsnowthis.com, where you can find all the Star Wars podcasts you can ever dream of. Thank you once again for listening to this episode of the Last Star Wars Podcast, and we'll see you next week.